Hi, welcome back to Gabe Miller Music. Today, we're making a full song on the Akai Force. Full arrangement, complete with vocals, whole 9 yards. So to start off, here's what I've got so far. I made this a few days ago. It's a reimagining of a song of mine that's already been out for a while because I'm working towards an album. It's a whole thing. I'll get into that at some point. But regardless, this arrangement, this reimagining had been living rent-free in my head for like a week, and I finally got it out of my system a few days ago. So let's walk through the individual elements of what I've got so far. First of all, this chord stack made in the Hype synth. And this is a modified preset, Dyno Supersaw. And of course, the main attraction being the addition of the filter sweep. So you can see here my filter cutoff settings and whatnot. So it's basically just a low pass filter with the resonance turned up a good bit that lifts at a rate that was dialed in by ear to work with the tempo. And another thing to note is that that last chord rings out quite a bit longer. So I very intentionally left gaps between each of the chords, except for that last chord that rings out for a while. And I'll probably put some little fills in these gaps at some point, potentially maybe. If I hold down note, you can see I've got progressions selected. So if I go to Shift Config, I've got Ballad 02 as the chord progression. So it was just a matter of playing those through in a way that I knew would work with the melody, because I already had the melody in mind going into this, and so then I just had to figure out a progression to go under that. And this is what I ended up with. And as far as processing goes, everything is happening within the plugin itself, like all that delay and reverb and shimmery stuff. The only thing I've added is the ducker, which is ducking everything to the kick. Up next, we add on the drums. Hear that sidechain really kicking in. So let's go into note. You notice these are muted. I've got a ride cymbal here for like another section. And then I've actually got this snare here mainly as a guide. This snare is hitting like right on the grid. And then I've been able to go into the grid and shift this clap because it's got that little lead in. And so I've shifted it so that that main transient, that main snare layered bit hits right as this snare does. And then I've just muted it. So I just like nailed the timing once and then just like copied that all the way through. So the net result is that we have the actual snare bit of this hitting right on the grid with a little clap lead in, which is quite nice. Let's go into the actual processing. These are all AU5 samples, by the way. And the main thing going on in here is the soft clipper. So it's a good sample, but the soft clipper really brings it to life. So pretty simple in the drums department. Bring in the melody. This is another hype preset that I've modified. And the fun thing going on here is the glide. So if I go into clip, you'll notice some layered notes like this one right here. These are very subtly offset from each other to basically trigger the glide. So listen to what happens with this note. I'll solo this. There are those few instances of layered notes to very intentionally trigger the glide to happen. And then the rest of the time, it just doesn't trigger at all. And once again, all of the effects are happening just within Hype itself. And we've got no other processing on this. And finally, let me show you this by itself first. This big old pad. And this kind of fills in the gaps left by that first like future bass saw stack. And it's nice and shimmery. So here's what it sounds like with all the processing removed. This is the hype preset massive crescendo. I don't think I've really modified it all that much. And literally, I just copied this exact chord progression into this synth slot, which is easy enough to do. Then we start bringing in effects. Ensemble. That's not doing much. Granulator. An octave up. That goes a long way towards the shimmer. Some EQ. Cutting both some lows and some highs, just taming it a bit. And some reverb. Which complements that main saw bass nicely. So if we get rid of the solo button and launch everything. So the next few steps are to add a proper bass. If I go into the clip for the main saw stack, you'll see there's a bass note here that I can just harvest by copying that clip and deleting these notes out of the duplicate clip. But I do want to give it a proper dedicated saw bass, so I'll get into that. Maybe some fills between these chord gaps. And I've already also come up with some vocal ideas. So let's get into that next. And it is about a week later. I promised you vocal demos and bass. We've got both, plus some new sections added and an arrangement conceived. So after I film this, I'm going to go ahead and jam this out live so that I can export those tracks, process them in post, all that fun stuff. So vocal demo, first of all, I started it in mVoice on my computer. It's like a vocal synthesis plugin that I did a video on a while back. And then I ended up throwing most of that out because I recreated it with a synth lead on here. So I've got a verse section, a pre-chorus section, and that goes nicely into the drop. So let me show you that. So it sounds cheesy as hell, but that little nasal lead is just a proof of concept for what will eventually be a proper vocal part. So this first section has some new elements that I'll get into in a second and features the same chord progression as the drop. And then this little pre-chorus section has a modified chord progression. I'm going to show you how these connect. And as you can probably hear, now we have a big old bass part. So that is this right here. So this is a pretty heavily modified hype preset. And I've gone in, made it nice and growly and driven and added some oscillators. And then I have matched the filter sweep exactly to that main filtered saw stack part. So now, if I launch this, they meld pretty nicely. And then once we sidechain everything to the kick, we've got a pretty fantastic, in my opinion, foundation to work off of. And you might have noticed that little filter sweep thing I did leading into the chorus. That's because I've got a couple of macros set. I'm going to get into that in a second because I've got a few that I want to walk you through that are very much tailored for this song and for this jam. But first, I want to keep going into these new elements that I've added. For the verse and pre-chorus, we've got this piano. This is a multi-sampled piano that came as a part of either my MPC-1 or this, I don't remember which at this point. It's the Akai F9 instrument collection, and it's just a bunch of key group programs. So this is a pretty cheesy sounding piano without processing. Let me turn off all the effects so you can hear what this sounds like by itself. Fairly fake and dinky. And this is on a really low velocity setting. On high velocity, it sounds even more kind of fake and sharp. So that was the best sound that I could find that I already had on this thing. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to work with it. So we add an EQ. With a lot of filtering. And also it got really quiet, so I just cranked the output here. Granulator. I love the granulator so much. Reverb. Here's the thing that really brought it to life. lo-fi. And by itself, that sounds like a bit much, but in the context of Emit, it kind of smooths out the rough edges. That's our vocal guide. And I've also added this ARP. So this is our verse section, similar elements in the pre-chorus. Like I showed you, we go into our drop, and then we go into a second drop. So I've added another instance of the Dyno Supersoft preset, and this time I've done very little with respect to filtering. Like there's a tiny little filter sweep, so all of these quick plucks get a bit more pluckiness. But it's just this big old wall of sound that goes well with this modified drum part. Once again, the side chaining is very harsh. I know. I like how that sounds. And then a modified ARP part, which sounds kind of dorky by itself, but I think works in the context of the mix. And then finally, this second little lead bit to float over the top of the chords. I'm probably going to put this through some sort of amp simulator in post. I would have done it on the MPC 1 if I was making the song on there, but this doesn't have like the brand new MPC plugins yet. I'm hoping it'll get them. I genuinely don't know if it will, but I'm holding out hope that Akai will follow their kind of previous precedent and add the new MPC plugins to this thing eventually. We'll see. Regardless, there are a couple other things I want to draw your attention to before I get into actually jamming this. First of all, we got this first initial version of the drop, and then I've got another drum pattern that just adds that ride cymbal. And then this second scene is a duplicate of this scene, but with the ride cymbal drum part and the addition of a second lead layer. This is from my $5 key group pack, link in the description. Works for the Force and standalone MPCs. And this is just an octave up double of that main lead part. So when I launch this all together, it's kind of the big version of the more stripped down initial portion of the drop. And this can go in stages. So what I'm going to do is start with this stripped down, then just launch the ride cymbal part, let that loop, and then go into the full section with the ARP and the octave up synth. And finally, I also have a version of the pre-chorus, which becomes just kind of an actual chorus with like the full arrangement. And I've modified the chord progression to match. And then modified the kick part to match the chord progression. And then we can go back into one more big old drop, and that's our song. So in addition to all of this clip launching nonsense that I've set up, I've also set up a few macros like I mentioned earlier. First of all, the filter sweep for a main lead. If I go into edit knobs, we can see that here. So I've actually got just the filter plugin inserted on it, and I've dialed in the cutoff frequency range so that all the way down, it's as low as I want it to go. And then all the way up is just its kind of normal setting for a proper drop. And I've also gone in and reversed the resonance. So essentially when the knob is as low as it goes, the resonance is cranked a bit. And then when the knob is way higher up, the resonance is way down. So we get the benefit of having resonance kind of peaking along the filter sweep, because I really like the way that sounds. But then we don't have the annoyance of a giant resonant peak being there once the filter is all the way open. So by the time it's at 100%, the resonance is tamed back down and the filter's all the way open and it sounds completely normal, like nothing ever happened to it. Along with that, I've also got two other macros. One for the pad, So I want to bring it in and have it be super muted. So I've set the hype cutoff and I've set the granulator mix to go from really low to pretty high. And once again, I've pretty carefully controlled the ranges. And so when I turn this knob, it gets more high end, more shimmer. And this is it all the way open. And then finally, just a really simple, just subtle cutoff mover for the ARP. And I've gone in and actually named these as well. That way I can easily see which parameters are which. So the next step is for me to try to jam this all out live. This will probably take a few takes to get correct. If this was an actual live setting, I'd probably streamline this quite a bit and spend a bunch of extra time on it. But because this is a YouTube jam, I only need to nail it once out of like multiple takes, and I think I can do that. So I'm going to be launching patterns, launching scenes, turning the macro knobs at the desired times. And of course, this will all get recorded into the arranger view. I'll probably make a few modifications, export the individual tracks, mix them in post, refine the vocal demo, send that to a vocalist, and then mix all that. And then I'm going to overdub that over the live jam. So what you're about to see is the uncut live jam with the audio of the fully mixed, finished song. Enjoy.
The sea of LEDs fills my head with electricity. The trance pulling away, the neon glow pulls back like gravity. Because I left my heart behind in the neon city. I know I left my heart behind in the neon city. I'm drifting through the streets like a ghost caught in a reverie. A portal to another world opened up right in front of me. I left my heart behind in the neon city.
If you'd like to see some more Akai Force, you can click or tap up over here somewhere. I've got some more stuff for you to check out. And of course, I'll be back with a new video in a little bit. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching.